Hi, I'm Wade from Thoroughbred Diesel. Today we're going to be installing a S&S CP4 Bypass Kit for the early model 6.7 PowerStrokes, the 2011 to 2019 trucks. The S&S Diesel CP4 Bypass Kit services the 2011 to current 6.7 PowerStrokes. Now, everything is all in one part number that services all of those years. However, there are differences between the 11 and 19 trucks and the 20 and 22 trucks. We already have a video done where we did a CP4 bypass installation on a 2021 truck, so you can check that out here. Hopefully we'll link you to that. But we wanted to go ahead and get you a video today that talks about installing the CP4 bypass on the 11 to 19 truck. So we've got one of our inside salesmen let us borrow his 2016 6.7 PowerStroke, so that's what we're going to do today. Just a quick run through and what comes in the kit and what this does. CP4 Bypass Kit from S&S Diesel is, they've really done a good job on this. You know, we talk a lot about this in our other videos, our unboxing videos, just our tech overview on it. S&S Diesel has got some phenomenal videos that they did where they actually took their owner's truck, just completely wrecked a CP4 pump, ground everything down, turned the barrels 90 degrees to the cam, put their CP4 bypass kit on it to show that the debris from a CP4 failure does not make it downstream into your other high side components. And I say that all the time, and I mean rails, injectors, the fuel cooler, doesn't make it back to the tank so it can be ingested by your low side lift pump or your lift pump. And just having that material all through your system that makes for a very, very expensive repair when you have a CP4 failure. So now with S&S Diesel CP4 Bypass Kit, we keep that shrapnel contained to the return side, and it passes through this return side filter, thereby catching it, and the fuel that goes to the tank is clean. Then the fuel coming out of the tank is filtered again before being delivered back to the CP4. And actually what S&S Diesel has found with their testing is you can make it farther on a CP4 failure when you actually have the failure that is, that starts to generate the debris that goes through the system. This is going to help the pump live longer, keep you from being broke down on the side of the road, all the things. So in the kit, what you'll find is this is your low side or your lift pump delivery that will be delivered right to the FCA or the improp on the vehicle. By blocking off the fuel flow that comes from the CP4, from the bottom side of the CP4 pump or the belly of the pump where the actual failure happens, we block that fuel flow off with this block. And then our improp is in here. Then you have your clean fuel is delivered to the improp, then out to the pumps and then the ejectors. So that's how this keeps the debris from going through the pumps on the CP4 and thereby going to your injectors. So you'll get this line which is already assembled for you. All of these quick connect fittings are exactly Ford OE style, so they didn't spare any expense in that. This is a machined aluminum block off that your improp will be reinserted to. Why did I trip that up? You have your lines that will be the return side service for the filter, the return fuel filter that goes through here, again, that catches the debris from the pump, because now we're catching the return fuel that's actually coming from the belly of the pump where the failure was from the cam grinding, and that's caught right here. You have a hardware bag that comes in the kit. You also have full color instructions that come in the kit. Shout out to S&S Diesel for that, because so many companies now are not including instructions anymore. And then you have this low side supply that is actually going to be used for the 2020 and up trucks. We won't be using that there, so we're going to just toss that aside. So for our 2016 Ford U11 to 19 guys, this is exactly what we're going to be using for our installation. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, we're going to start off with getting our vacuum and our coolant lines out of the way here on these trucks. So for our vacuum line, the two blue connectors on it, just unhook that right there, and then we will unhook it. It'll be clipped to this overflow or the degas bottle line. We just unclip it from there. Then we'll do our coolant line on your degas bottle, wait for the truck to cool off, remove the cap like so, and I'll pinch it off downstream like this. Have something underneath of the line to catch the residual fuel that comes out of it. And then go ahead and remove the clamp like so. And go ahead and loosen that up. And then you have this line that is going over and servicing your EGR cooler. We're just going to go ahead and we're just going to tuck this under the vacuum line real quick and go through and pop the push pins out as we go, and then all of the points where it's connected here at the air intake box as well. And then we'll just fold that out of our way. I have the batteries off this truck, so we're good to go right there. Now it is clamped onto this coolant line, which all we will do in there in servicing, it's also pushed into the intake. This clip is broken, but you will pop that push pin out for this coolant line that services the EGR, and then that gives you enough slack to get our air intake out when it's time to do that. So we've got our vacuum line hanging out. We'll get it out once our air intake is off. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and work on getting our air intake box out now. So start out here with an 8 metric. There is a bolt that holds the air intake box to the radiator shroud. So we just go ahead and we want to remove that bolt there. Already loosened it up. And then switch back over to 5/16, and we will loosen up the clamp on the air intake, which is right here. We've already done that. And then what you're going to be doing when you pull this assembly out of here, you're going to be going this way, and then it'll sneak underneath of this coolant line, which is going to be right here. So I just got it positioned up there and I'm ready to go with it. You want to unhook your MAF sensor here. We'll go ahead and do that, and then just go ahead and pop the latches off the box. There's 4 of them along the front side of the grill here. Just get your box and go ahead and get the box open and up and ready, and then just go ahead. I've got my hands full. Go ahead and dislodge it from the lower intake, such as so, and then just start moving it out of the engine compartment. Like so. And that sneaks everything out for you and gives you a clear shot at your lower intake. All right, we're gonna go ahead and take the vacuum line off of the vacuum pump down there. Same thing, 2 blue tabs there to just squeeze those and it disconnects. And what we're gonna do now is we're gonna start working on our intercooler pipes, the hot side pipe and the cold side pipe. The cold side pipe is pretty easy because we don't have to take the whole pipe out. We just got to get this elbow out to make it to where we can take this lower intake manifold off. All right, so you've got these spring clips on here. You can use a pick clip if you want to, but just get them started out of their groove and then just work it around. What I do is I actually start both ears out of the groove, and it just seems like it makes it easier to get it off like so. And then just got to get it dislodged from the throttle valve here, and then just pull straight back. And you've got enough give in that pipe to get clear of it, like so. And then you've got your clamp loosened up, and then all you got to do is take that elbow out. If you want to take the whole pipe out, you can. It's just unnecessary. All you really need to do there is do just like I showed you. Make sure your clamp is clear of that power steering reservoir, and then you can just roll it right out. I just like to take the fuel filter out before I remove the hot side intercooler pipe. Just one less thing to get broken or whatever while you're working with that pipe. So on that green clip for the supply to the CP4, the legs are at the bottom side of it. You just push those together and then push straight up, and that releases it. So get yourself a towel or a rag or something, put it underneath of it, catch residual fuel, and then just pop the supply off, and then it'll rotate kind of out of your way here. Tank side can be a little bit more tricky. This is the way I do these fittings. I went through it a couple times here, but on this fitting, I just push down on the back side of it, and when you push down, that kind of releases a small clip on the front side of it. You see that there? And then that'll give you actual full actuation to pull that suction line off, or the lift pump supply line. So at that point, then you push it down and you pull backward. Siri can't find actuation in my contacts, which is odd, because I would have thought I would have had something like that in there, honestly. And then you go ahead and disconnect the supply side that's at the filter by pushing the 2 tabs in at the filter and then pulling straight back on that, just like so. Then the fuel filter is easy. You guys have changed the fuel filter before on these. You just turn it and it'll come to a point where it can pop right straight out, like so. Just try to catch as much of that residual fuel as you can, and the filter's out. All right, we're gonna go ahead and remove the hot side intercooler pipe. So the Ford intercooler pipes, they've got these clamps on them, where all you've got to do is just get underneath of the clamp, move the clamp up, and you'll hear it clip or click, and then that means it's released. So I don't know if you got to hear that one, but it'll go up to a certain point and it'll stay there. Just like that. So usually, you know, you got it released when you can grab one ear of it and both sides of it shake. That means you've got it released. Okay. So then just go ahead and pull straight back from the turbo. If it gives you any trouble, just go in there, lift your clamp up again, like so. Might be necessary to leave it in there. So once you've got it removed from the turbo, then you'll go ahead and loosen your clamp up here, and then you've got enough room to get your intercooler boot off at the air to water, and then just pull the pipe straight out like so. All right, we're going to remove the fuel bowl canister right here. The fuel bowl canister is held on by 4 bolts on it, so I'm going to show you where they are real quick. So you've got one at the very back here, you've got one right here on the side, and then you have a stud right here. The stud has got a vacuum line loom on it, so you just lift it up and off the stud and then pull the stud out of the bottom. And then that gives you enough room on these incoming fuel lines, the low pressure lines, to be able to get to the 4th bolt, which is right here in the middle, somewhere between the fuel temp sensor and the fuel pressure sensor, or vice versa there. So we wanted to show you this on the GoPro so you can see what we're doing. We're taking this canister out because it's going to allow us to bring out the intake a little bit easier. So we'll show you on the other camera, kind of pulling this out, but just want to make sure everybody saw where the bolts and everything were. All right, going after the fuel filter tray here, first thing we're going to do is we're going to bring this, I showed you on the GoPro shot, we're going to bring this clip that's holding the vacuum line on. So we just put a little backside pressure on it and then just lift it right off. And then this stud, it's a stud that goes on that position there, so we just go ahead and pull it out. And then we've got our other two bolts loosened up, and they're ready to come out. And both of these bolts the same size here. And the stud comes out, and then that gives us enough movement to where the stud was holding down one of the lift pump lines going into the cup here. So we get out our old handy dandy 8 metric universal swivel, just sneak past the lines and then get on the 4th bolt there. So there we are. Just go ahead and start bringing it out. We've got the fuel cup coming out. We just kind of cut away there. Watch on your supply line or your suction line here too, or the supply from the tank. You want to make sure that you get it unhooked from the clip that's on the side of the cup there. I just leave the bolt in when I bring it out. That's the little devil right there himself. Same size bolt. All of those bolts are the same length, so You can put anything you want to back in there. But yeah, it's hard to get it with that line. It's hard to get it, so you just need to pull it and get her done there. All right, so what we're working on now is we're going to go ahead and start beginning the process of getting the upper intake manifold off this plastic spider unit. To start that process, really what we do is just go ahead and remove the 2 bolts that hold the transmission dipstick and the engine oil dipstick. So you've got 2 8 metric bolts that hold both of those on. They both need to come out, and then that just gives you enough movement in the lines to be able to get to your manifold, the 4 intake manifold bolts at the driver's side of the intake manifold. So, and I'm going to show you those bolts right now as soon as I get this last dipstick bolt out. So there's 15 overall bolts inside of the intake manifold. So you can see that just gives us just a little bit of articulation right there to where we can get to that other manifold bolt. So there's 4 bolts on the intake manifold right here. This is the leg going into the engine intake manifold. Then there's 4 on that leg, so that's 8. And then there are 7 of them here in the top for the intake bolts. And what I want to do is I will switch over to GoPro and show that. But moving these dipsticks just gives us the ability to get to these 4 bolts right here on the intake. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and remove them, and then we're going to switch over shots, and I'm going to show you the rest of the bolts on the top side of it. But again, an 8 metric swivel socket is really nice on these trucks, especially on getting these intake bolts out. So it really gives us just about all the range we need to be able to get to it. So we're going to pull these 4 bolts out of this intake runner right here. Again, they're 1, 2, there's the 3rd one, and then the 4th one is right there. And just a long socket and universal swivel, or however you want to do it. If you just wanted to get back there and you got, you know, thin enough hands, you can get back there and get to it. There's that, loosen it up. A tall socket might get there. So different combinations, different extensions, different everything will get you. You just got to keep fooling with it till you get what you want on it. So we're going to go ahead and pull these 4 bolts out now. We wanted to show you all the 7 bolts on top of the intake manifold here. So you've got your 1, 2, 3 right here, and then you have 4, 5, 6, and 7. This is on the top of the intake manifold again. And then your next step on the top here is you will be getting your map sensor out of here. So there's a little black tab right there where my finger is. I hope you can see that really well. So just push it in and then remove the connector. And then you have a push pin on the back right there that you'll work free of the manifold. There it is. So there's that. So that leaves us with the 4 bolts on the back of the manifold. I think Adam will be able to take over on that shot and show you that. You'll just get this wire out of your way. And then I've got a really good shot of it right here. There is 1 more push pin on the back pressure sensor wire that is back here. And this is a good time to go ahead and start working to get it out as well. We've got our last 4 bolts here on the intake manifold that we're working on passenger side of the truck. So you just want to go ahead and remove these bolts. Now these bolts, we're talking about this in some of our other videos where we've done 670 intake manifolds. These bolts have got little plastic keepers on them. See the little black plastic thing? Those are really handy because what you can do is you can actually leave the bolt in the hole that it came from, removing this, and those black plastic keepers will keep it up far enough to where when you go to remove it, it won't drag on the manifold getting it out. So that makes it really, really nice. So we showed you with our GoPro shot, we showed you on the exhaust back pressure sensor there that's got the clip for the wire. So we've already got it. That's going to cause us, that bolt right there, going to cause us some grief. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it. And then your back 2, again, long extension, swivel 8, makes it really easy to get to. And yeah, there you go. So we're gonna go ahead and get these 4 bolts out and go ahead and pop this intake manifold off. So we've got all of our bolts loosened, and the bolts we're leaving in, we're leaving them in on that wire right there. You want to make sure you get it out of your way. And we will just lift it up. Kind of turn it towards the, over here on the back side of this. I forgot. You can't see it, you just have to trust me. There is a vacuum line clip on the hose going to the wastegate. You got it. Good job, man. Just turn it and then it comes right out. I forgot about that one. Yeah, this little clip that was on there for the wastegate actuator. So there's our upper intake manifold out. All right, we're going to go ahead and get our EGR crossover tube that comes into our lower intake manifold off. To get it off, you just go ahead and unhook the wiring harness from your temp probe that is right here. So we'll have to remove that temp probe. That was broken there. And then the temp probe has got a push pin into the manifold. And we'll just go ahead and back it out. There's that. And that gets our wiring harness completely out. Then you've got 4 8 metric bolts here that'll come out. All right, loosen those up. And then 2 of them at the EGR side. They are different lengths as well, so you might want to keep them separated. And remember that the longer of the 2 goes against the cooler, and get that one going through there. So you can see there is a difference in those. The washers side goes to the intake manifold. The one without the washers goes to the cooler side. So just keep that in mind. All right. And then you've got your wiring harness undone. So these gaskets are different, so I'm just going to try to leave them intact where they are. This is a high mileage truck, so everything's staying right where we need it to. All right, lower intake manifold assembly. 3 bolts that hold this on. They are 10 metric heads. They are 2 short ones and 1 long one. Okay. And then you have your boots at the intake portion of the turbo and the discharge portion of the turbo, outlet portion. So what you want to do there is you just want to get your 5/16, and I loosen up the ones that are at the charger and at the intake. And then what I do with this assembly is I just grab the assembly and rock it. And then you're just looking to see, did the boot come loose at the turbo? Yes. Did it come loose at the intake? But you're not wanting to bring it out because you still got 1 more line to go. But I just rock that, make sure everything came loose before I go to pulling it out. So Adam's going to come around the other side, and we're going to show you the closed case vent hose. So the CCV system has actually got an electronic sensor on it right here. Just unplug it like so. And then on these older model trucks, the CCV hose is very, very brittle. First off, I try not to even look at this thing. I mean, honest to goodness, I've broken them by just thinking about touching them. So I disconnected at the CCV filter itself. So to do that, you just pinch it on the side and then just kind of work it up and down, and it'll come dislodged. So there you go. You'll want to have a towel ready to clean up residual oil that will come out of there, just like so. I'll make mention too, I'm scared to death of these manifolds because they're wide open. I always put a towel in them to make sure that nothing goes down in there. So I should have mentioned that in the other one. So we'll go ahead and start working this lower intake manifold out. You want to watch the electrical connector for the throttle valve too. Make sure you don't make contact there. And then just work it right out. And voila. Time to remove our FCA. We have to have our FCA out and assembled to the S&S CP4 bypass block before we reinstall it. So we like to go ahead and pop this out. So moment of truth, we want to make sure we pull this FCA out. We don't have any metal shrapnel here. If you do, you know, that's a sign of a failing CP4 pump. So you've got to conduct yourself accordingly. You know, at the very least, you're going to need to put a CP4 pump on it. If, you know, obviously if you haven't had the bypass kit, then you're going to more than likely be looking at an injector that has caught shrapnel in it, and you're looking at a whole conversion at this time. So, yeah, you know, we've had some questions since we've been doing these installs, and I want to take a minute to talk about it here and not eat up a bunch of camera time. If you've had a failure, if you've had a CP4 failure and the truck is not running, you're not able to just buy a CP4, buy the bypass kit, plumb everything back up, and try to fire it back up and go. At that point, you were already at the end game of having to replace everything. So we just talk about pulling these FCAs out. If you've got metal on the FCA, you've got metal in the system, and everything needs to be replaced. So we're gonna pop this one out. This truck's got 250,000 miles. These are, I'm sorry, T25 Torx bolts holds the FCA in. You can see Adam's arms are starting to shake because I've been yapping. I need to go and get this out of here. And there's one, there's two T25 bolts that hold it in. The one at the back, usually I'll just leave it in the end prop. Run it all the way out. A lot of times you just can't get to it. Sorry. Actually, I got my fingers through there and was able to get it, so now we don't have to worry about it. All right. So let's rock this end prop out and say a prayer for this guy. So I just kind of rock it back and forth, just trying to be cognizant of the O-rings that are on it. And voila, that's what you want. Oh, sorry. Good clean screen. Everything looks good there. We're in good shape. Awesome. All right, very good. Very good. Now we'll move out to the table and show you assembling this to the S&S block. All right, a little bit of assembly that we've got to do on our S&S CP4 bypass kit. So first off, what we want to do is we're working to get our FCA installed on the block off plate from S&S here. So what we want to do with this hose assembly is we want to clean this hose assembly out and make sure that we don't have any debris in there. S&S already puts plastic plugs in it for shipping. Make sure nothing gets in it through the shipping process, but it's still a really good idea to just blow everything out just to make sure that we're good to go there. Okay, so we've got that cleaned out. So we'll go ahead and put our plugs back in there. Just make sure that we don't get anything when we get it inside of the truck. And we're going to go ahead and open up our package that's got the blue O-ring in it. Now this may change. There may be an engineering revision here. We might go back to a black O-ring, but there's a blue O-ring in here, 3 black O-rings, and the 2 fittings that you need for your filter head base. So we're just going to go ahead and knock this out real quick. So you've got your 2 aluminum fittings that come in here. And then the bag comes with, again, possibly the blue O-ring. You don't get a big ball of fuzz on there. Possibly the blue O-ring, could be a black one that comes in here. So just the larger of the 2, and then 3 blacks. And the 3 black O-rings, they're all the same size. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll these over onto our return filter head fitting. All right. And then we're just going to put those, we're just going to snug those into the filter head real quick and just get them out of our way so we can concentrate on this. Okay. So this will be assembled just the same way that you see the O-rings on the stock FCA. So you're going to have your blue O-ring with the teeth, I call them, on it, and that will go here onto the filter base. There's a recessed channel for that, and then you've got your blue O-ring for the end of the nozzle. I hope I was in the shot there. I'm sorry, black O-ring for the end of the block-off plate that goes on just like that. Now you want to lubricate that with some clean engine oil before you insert it. Now this is going to orient in the truck. Let me look at your camera angle. So this is going to be pointing out towards the fuel rail. So it's kind of going to go in such as so, with the directionally getting that out to the fuel rail. So we want to make sure that we put our end prop in the same orientation. So you have your FCA end prop, sorry I keep calling it different things there. And when you install it, the electrical portion of it is going to be pointing away from the hose there, so I hope you can see that. Then inside of this kit, S&S gives you 2 longer Allen headed bolts that will hold that down. They are 5/32 size, so make sure that you use those. I put my back one in before I put this in because it just makes it easier to get in the truck. So there you are. There is the FCA installed on our line and ready for installation in the truck. Before we get underneath the hood of the truck, I want to make a correction. I said that the Allen head bolts that are now going to be holding down the FCA in the S&S bypass block off were 5/32. They are not. These are 4 metrics, and they will be torqued to 60 inch-pounds. So we're going to go ahead and put our CP4 bypass block in here. And what we're doing is we're going to be orienting everything towards the driver's side. You want to make sure that you keep a good eye on this big O-ring, the black, blue, whatever, on the blue one. I use just a little bit of like engine assembly lube on there where it's just a little bit thicker oil, and that keeps it in there really good. Then before you start it, you want to get the Allen bolt that's on the forward side. You want to put it in because under that crossover, it gets a little bit hard to get to. So sorry about bumping your camera at them. So just try to keep your finger on that until the very last minute. I usually put the clamp in first under the coolant crossover before I start manipulating everything in the hole, and then we just line everything up and push straight down. Felt good to me. Okay. Okay. Then we'll add our other Allen head bolts in here. And then get everything lined up. I'll start it with a T-handle. Make sure that we get good engagement of the screw into the pump. And my back one. But once it begins to tighten, I'll start alternating. Once I see the head of the FCA rock back and forth, I just continue to go back and forth until it's home. Like so. And then we've got our line routed out towards the driver's side. That's really all you're looking for there. It'll come back around and it will engage the fuel filter over on this side. So this is kind of your route that you're looking for right here. So that's out of the way. So now we'll just grab a torque wrench and we'll torque everything down. So this is 60 inch-pounds. So a long Allen will get you where you need to be here. So 4 metric. So we're going to go ahead and get our torques clicked off here, and then at that point you're ready to start laying your intake back on. So any other prep work that you need to do here, make sure you get your rags out of the intake, make sure that the that you've got all your bolts and everything lined out just for ease there. So 60 inch-pounds on these. We're going to click it off, and then we'll come back and start putting our intake on. All right, when you're going back in with your lower intake manifold, first off, don't forget to plug in the FCA, so you're good to go there. And then I found it easier just to go ahead and put the boots on. Just go ahead and put the boots on the charger before you go and put the lower intake manifold on. It just worked out a whole lot easier. You just got a little bit more articulation. This does raise, obviously this raises the FCA up a little bit, so getting it in here is a little bit more of a challenge now. If you get this in here and you notice that it's hitting on that FCA, you can remove a little bit of material from the bottom of the intake to give you clearance for that. So, you know, don't go crazy, don't go punching all the way through the intake, but you can remove a little bit of material from it, calls it out in S&S's directions where to do that. So we're gonna grab our lower intake and get ready to lay it in there. I want to talk more about that when we're talking about this maybe touching the electrical connector on the FCA. This casting flash right here, this is what we're talking about. Some trucks it'll touch, sometimes some trucks it won't, so it just depends on what you've got. So this may be the material that you have to take off, and just again, you just got to smooth it down with the intake and should get you where you need to be. All right, go ahead and putting our lower intake manifold back on. What I find is that when you go to reinstall the lower intake manifold, it's easier to leave the turbo inlet on the manifold, but the outlet, put it back onto the turbo. Talking about the boot, so put the turbo boot on back onto the outlet and put the inlet back onto the intake manifold. Don't forget to hook up the power to your CP4. Push it till it clicks, and then make sure that you've got it, because you don't want to have to go back in there after that when the truck's assembled. Okay, so I wanted to show you on ours, we did have a problem with clearance, so there's how we ground our flashing down. So there's that. We're going to try to do this on one take on the camera here. So going back in, what I'll do is I'll kind of cant everything, and throttle valve. I like to take the throttle valve off before we go back in. For some reason it just goes a lot easier with that too, just less before you do. So I'll line up my top boot just like so, and then that gives me a lot of slack to be able to get everything lined up. Boom, intake manifold. So you can see that pretty much fell in there. You want to check your FCA, make sure you've got clearance. We got clearance. So now you just go ahead and put your 3 10 metric headed bolts back in the back into the intake plenum. Your 2 shorts go there, and then the long one goes here. And then you tighten those back down to 18 foot-pounds. So we'll do that. Don't forget, again, make sure you check your electrical clearance at your FCA. Make sure it's clearing. If it's not clearing, take a little bit more of the flashing off. If it is clearing, go ahead and torque everything down. So we'll torque those down, and then tighten up our turbo boot clamps. Now we've got our lower intake manifold back on, we want to go ahead and put our throttle valve back on. Don't forget the gasket on this, 4 8 metric headed bolts to get it started, or to tighten it down. For some reason today, every bolt I have touched is acting like it wants to cross thread. Yeah, there you go. All right, so I've got those 4 started. I'll go ahead and hook in the electrical connector on the CCV right here, and then I'll connect the hose to the CCV, push it till it clips, and then all that leaves me with is hooking up my throttle valve right here, electrical connector, which we'll get. So we're gonna go ahead and tighten this throttle valve down, and then we'll move over to that EGR crossover pipe. On our EGR crossover pipe, don't forget that the longer of the 4 bolts, the 2 longer ones, are the ones that go in the cooler side. So I'll just start my top one, so we're good to go there, and I'll come back and I'll start my bottom one, so we're good to go there. Then on my intake side, I'll come in, put my gasket in on the intake side and get it lined up here, make sure everything lines up.
like so. And then I'll grab the shorter of the 2 bolts. And we will install them. Oops. Grab the wrong ones. Oh, that's right. That's correct. Adam was holding our coolant line there, so no. Good. Yeah. All right, so you got your bolts in. You want to tighten that down, tighten these back down, and then don't forget to run your electrical connector back over and hook your electrical connector in right underneath here. You have to get everything lined out. Then you've got your little push pin that goes back in there. If these have gotten brittle and broke on you like they did for us, of course, because we're shooting a video, you'll want to make sure that you use zip ties here because you're too close to that fan drive to chance it. So we're going to get this tightened down, and then we will be on to upper intake manifold. So we're ready to go ahead and put our upper intake plenum on. One thing you want to make sure that you do, get your rags out of your intake, and then you want to clear your landing zone for the thing. You want to make sure that the vacuum line for the wastegate is out of the way. This wiring harness that's got the map, the exhaust back pressure sensor, and then the turbo solenoid. Just make sure everything's out of your way, everything's clean, ready to go. Then you want to check the bottom of the plenum, make sure all of the orange gaskets are there, everything is lined up, so we're good to go. Make sure your bolts are up high enough to where they don't drag while you're going in, and it should go right in for you once you get past that coolant tower there. Okay, this coolant tower is something that you really want to watch. Want to watch that plastic piece because you can get that and it be all kinds of fuzzled up for you. All right, so now at this point, you just go through and start tightening up the bolts that you have that stayed in the plenum. So the ones that stayed in the plenum, the more of them you had, the better you can do at getting everything lined up. So there's that, and then we'll get our back one here. That's perfect. Okay, so with 3 of them in there, we had one on each of your 3 mounting points. If you look at it like that, that's got us lined up. So you want to go through and tighten all these down to 89 inch-pounds, kind of get it in a crisscross pattern as best you can there. Word on these hoses, or these holes. So some of the bolts that you took out, the plastic keeper stayed on, some of them didn't. So if you've got one that a plastic keeper didn't stay on, you want to go through the holes and you want to try to feel for the hole that's got a plastic keeper still in it. And you just go down there and just feel if you can feel something that's, you know, kind of got that, I don't know, rubbery feeling, the best way I know how to explain it. That's the holes that didn't have, that they didn't come out of. So that's just an easy way to do that. Yeah, so we're gonna go through here. We're gonna get all of these bolts tightened down to 89 inch-pounds, and then we'll come back and get everything dressed up. All right, once you've got your intake plenum on and everything torqued down, these are 89 inch-pounds on all of the, shoot, I have lost the train of thought, all 15 bolts. You want to make sure that you get all of your wire clips back on. We showed you taking them off. The vacuum line gets clipped on the back there and it gets slinked underneath of that, underneath of the engine oil dipstick. So you just want everything to line up where it's supposed to line up. Don't forget to plug your map in because we don't want to fire it up and have an engine code. Yeah, so now we are at the bolts that hold the engine dipstick and the transmission dipstick down. So we're going to go ahead and install those. So your bolt without the washer is for the engine dipstick to the plenum, and then the bolt with the washer goes to couple the engine dipstick to the trans dipstick, like so. All right, so that's got that. I'll tighten those down, and then we'll come back and we will be doing the, what are we gonna do, Adam? Oh, we're gonna do the bottom of the fuel filter cup. All right, so our fuel filter cup, our little canister here is next, going to be the next thing that we're going to do. Remember, you've got your bolt that goes in underneath the fuel line, so just kind of tuck everything in here and get it all lined up. And then make sure that your clamp for the fuel filter or for the fuel lines goes underneath there. And then the supply line for the injectors, you just got to make sure that it is out and you can get it back in its little hose clamp. I don't think that you can see that in Adam's video, but we'll show you here in just a second. But yeah, we're going to go ahead and put those 3 bolts in, 4 bolts and or 3 bolts and a stud, and tighten them down. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else on that. It's just having to get to that bolt underneath the fuel line. You just got to grab the fuel lines, pull the fuel lines back, and drop your bolt in and tighten her down. So. Downhill side of it, we're getting close, fellas. All right, once you've got your fuel filter cup down, you just put your holder for the vacuum line on there, and then that'll have that taken care of. And then, make sure, yeah, then we just want to do a little bit of prep work for our next few steps, which is going to be fuel lines. So we want our supply line for our end prop is going to be out of our way there. And then we want to get this little 90-degree elbow that Ford gives us, because we're going to be connecting right to that line. So we'll just go ahead and remove that. You'll get a little bit of residual fuel out of there, but it won't be a ton. Set it up in your tray so you don't get it all over your truck. Okay. Clean the end of the line off. All right. Then you can take your line from S&S. And what you'll be doing there is you're just going to get it manipulated to where it fits in the best, and then you'll be going back. Just the S&S does the exact same thing with the fittings. They use the exact same style of fitting, the exact same color. So just pull your connector out of it, and you can go ahead and connect it back onto the fuel line, the pressure line. So this, to kind of explain what that is right there, that is going to be your fuel supply line. So your fuel supply now, your lift pump is still going to be, your lift pump is still going to be supplying your fuel filter, and then the fuel filter out of the fuel filter, and the line that we just connected is your fuel that will be going to the bottom of your CP4 pump, where your failure is going to be, cools that cam and everything in there. But this is our supply that is going to be going to our S&S, our CP4 block off, and that is going to be supplying good, clean, fresh fuel to the FCA. So we've done that there. So now it's time for, we're going to break out. We're going to go back on the bench. Oh, actually, you know what? We're not. We're going to go ahead and disconnect our return lines. This is where we are going to be filtering the return fuel from the engine. So these blue connectors, you have the safety clip on that, and you just pull that out and then push the connector in, like so, and then that gets your return line unhooked. And then you take this, and you'll take that fitting and you'll turn it up just like so. So now, what you're going to have is you're going to have the return fuel coming from the CP4, which is where the failure is going to be, is going to go into the filter and be filtered and then back to the tank. So the fuel that is coming out of the bottom of the pump is going to be filtered by the new S&S filter and going back to the bottom of the tank. So we've got that line turned up like that for us. Now we're going to go out on the bench, show you how to assemble your return filter. We're going to go ahead and assemble our S&S fuel filter housing. So you saw us in the previous clip, you've got to put the O-rings included in your hardware bag on the end of the fittings, and then just put both fittings into the filter housing. This is all aluminum stuff, so you don't have to get this super tight. And these are O-ring fittings as well, so double whammy. Just snug them down like so. Then you have 2 rubber grommets that come inside of the kit. These are just isolators for between the filter head and its mounting plate, so you just screw those into the filter base. like so. And then the filter base is going to be, or the mounting bracket is going to be oriented, obviously, with the tang away from the filter base there. There are two flange nuts in the kit, not locking nuts. They're in there. They're both 7/16. So just snug them down, like so. So there's your filter base, pretty well put together. Now, all you need to install it on these early model trucks, the non-2020s, is this Allen head bolt right here, screw. We'll show you installing that. So that's going to leave you with a spacer, long bolt, a lock nut, and a fender washer. These are not going to be used in this kit for this year model truck. 11 to 19s, you will not use these parts, so you can go ahead and set them aside. And then that's pretty much it. Cleaning up the fuel lines, we'll be doing that with those zip ties. I like to clean this filter base out just to make sure there's nothing from the machining process, nothing from the shipping process that's in here, just to get it clean. And then I like to hit my lines as well. So that'll have all that cleaned out, so we know we just won't get something that winds up getting caught in the filter that doesn't need to be in there. So let's get our filter base assembled, take of our line. So we'll go back into the truck now, and we'll go ahead and show you mounting this. And if you want to, it's not going to make any difference at all. You can go ahead and screw your fuel filter on. Just get your hand tight a little bit more. Then there's your assembly right there. All right. So now we'll go to the truck and go ahead and mount that in the truck. I like to do my return line hoses before I actually mount my return filter. So your line that has got the two female ends on it, the black and the blue, so both of the blue females are going to attach to the filter, so if that makes it any easier for you. But our black and blue female right here, this is going to be the return from the engine. So this is going to be from the engine that goes through the filter and then out of the filter and back to the tank. So that's going to be our black one, and we're going to connect it to the line. I'm going to let Adam see the shot right there. We're going to connect it to the factory line, and links and works just fine, snaps on fine, clean. So there you are on that. And then you take your other line that has one male in with the S&S emblem on it, S&S emblem on it, and then the other blue, and then it goes to this return line as well. Oh, sorry. How's you doing, camera? I see you, big boy. And then lock it back down just like you did before to make sure that it won't come out. So you can kind of work with your orientation there, whatever you really want to do, but this is going to be your back to the tank. So this is going to be the fuel that will be filtered that's going back to the tank. So again, remember, return fuel flow is back out of that to the tank. So all right, we've got that taken care of. I think it gets us where we want to be. Okay, all right, so let's go over and get the filter, and then we'll bring it over and get it installed. All right, so on your return lines here that we've adjusted, what we do is the one going back to the tank, we kind of get it over towards the driver's side, so that just gives us some slack to be able to push it down. And then the metal line is from the engine, your return from the engine. So now the lines that S&S sends you, the ones with the blue connectors, the blue end always goes to the filter. The one with the black female end, so this is both females on this line, this is the one that comes from the engine, and the one with the aluminized male fitting that's got the S&S logo in it, this is the one that's going to be going to the tank. So you're going to see how this routing goes and why we did the things that we did here as far as pushing these lines over. So first off, we're going to put the to the tank line in there, and then on these lines, make sure that you look down in on the ones you disconnected, make sure that the yellow rubber O-ring is still in there. It is. Push that until it clips, and then push the lock in. All right, so that's going to be our to the tank line that will orient this way. And then our other female line, which is the from the engine line, the black end goes on the metal rail, and you want to orient this line going towards the back. So push it down till it clips, and then once you orient that going to the back, that gives you about enough slack to get everything you need to get it on this side of the filter, so your line orientation will be as such. All right. So now we remove the bolt holding our ground wire right here, little 8 metric headed bolt, and we're going to replace that with our 4 metric Allen bolt and bring our filter head in here. All right, and then we'll bring our ground strap back up. That's going to go right here, just as it came off. And we're going to reinstall our bolt. Stupid ground strap, I was fighting that thing. Alright, well, we're going to go ahead and tighten the filter base down. All right, so now we have our line coming off the metal rail, and you'll have to just track this down visually. This is going to be coming from the engine, so that fuel needs to be going onto the inlet and lockdown of the filter head. The flow is this way, so fuel from the engine comes through the filter, is filtered, and then is returned back to the tank. So our return line back to the tank is just finagled around here to where we get enough slack on it to where it will hook there without a crimp, and we have done so just like so. So that gives us everything we need. Line sweeps really good, looks good, everything is good right there. So that is our return filter install. So now we're going to move into putting in our intercooler pipe. So we just get our intercooler pipe here, that gives us a clear shot to that. I'll go ahead and I'll start working with my lines to get everything where it needs to be. S&S does a really nice job of sending you clips that hold those lines. I'll show you those. One of the first ones that we're going to be using is for the supply line right here. So we just go ahead and put that on, and then we will secure this hose to the oil fill tube, just like so. And then that's just going to keep this line out of our way, like so. So we'll trim that back, and then that gives you a really nice good routing of that fuel line right there. We're going to install our hot side intercooler pipe on here now. You want to have your clamps where they're easily accessible, and just go ahead and push that towards the charger, get it on, and then push it forward till it clips like so. And then your boot side of this is always a fun time, and what makes it so fun is having, number one, the radiator hose in the way, and number two, your topside creamer trying to roll out from underneath of it the whole time you're working on something. Okay. There we go. Then 11 metric clamp right here. Always a good idea too is to dry out everything on your intercooler pipe, because there is going to be some residual oil in there from the CCV system. So you know, it's a good time to just get everything dried out and good to go there. So we're going to go ahead and tighten this intercooler clamp down, and then we're going to put our fuel filter on. All right, we're going to go ahead and install our fuel filter again. Just make sure you kind of keep it upwards there and keep your residual fuel in there, and get in, spin it around clockwise like so. And then we're lined out. Alrighty. So with that, we'll go ahead and install our line that goes to the injectors, and then the return line goes on the back side of that to the tank side. You have to get it on and then clamp down, and then our S&S line, pull the plug out of it, and it's ready to go on as well. So where is that? So that gives you fuel supply from the tank, filtered here and then out and branches off. Then the fuel supply, this bottom of the L is the fuel that goes to the bottom of the pump, keeps the pump lubricated and full of fuel. And then you have your fuel supply for the FCA. It's going to be going into the block off. The block off keeps the damaged fuel from coming back through, and this supplies the new fuel to it. And there you are. Another explanation of it, but there you are. So that's got everything lined out the way we want it to be. If you need slack in something, just around, you just don't want to make sure you just don't get the hoses in a kink or anything of that nature. So that's got that where we want it. We're able to get our oil cap. Everything is good there. So next we're going to put on our hot side intercooler pipe. Alrighty, we're going to go ahead and do our hot side elbow now. This is a really good time because this is where we have a lot of our oil, and just this boot just seems like it gives us so many problems. We want to get everything clean here as best we can. So go ahead and put it in the intercooler side again, and you want to just kind of eyeball how it lines up there, and then go ahead and push it back onto the throttle valve, push it till it clips as such, and then you want to turn it till it's correct, till it falls into the rib to where everything's even there. It's only one way it's going to go. So this is where we're at. Now we can take our clamp and tighten the clamp down, and we're good to go. So we're going to do this. Actually, I'll turn that where that's down here. We're going to go ahead and tighten this clamp down, and then next will be our vacuum line. You know, we can probably get that in this shot right now because you don't need to see us tightening down clamps. But vacuum line, just go ahead and hook it on right here. The blue end goes down towards the pump, push it on till it clips. That gets covered up by the intake box there to where you can't hardly see it. So you want to have that ready to go. So we'll tighten down this clamp, and then we'll be ready to go.
We are rolling.
All right, your air intake lid. I'm laughing because all three of us are out here working on this. But hey, I got guys out here who can hold hoses up for me. So this is how the air intake on these go. Right back over there and straight to the air intake pocket. You got it, you got it, you got it. Everybody can turn loose of what they got. Good to go. It's turn loose of. All right, so get your air intake on. Don't have to explain this. And you have a bolt that goes right here. Then you'll want to make sure that the intake mouthpiece, you have everything lined up on and pushed in. So we're going to work through that. We're going to get our bolt on, and then we'll show you our hoses lined up, and yeah, then we'll come right back. All right, once you've got your air intake on, make sure that you tighten the air intake up at the inlet portion right here, and then you have your bolt with the fender washer that goes on it. Plug your mass airflow sensor back in. Line routing here, make sure lines are straight there. We have our vacuum line, make sure it's not pinched. That's an important one. And then you will take your coolant line. It goes right here at the fender well. Then you've got a spot for it here at the turbo resonator. And then it will come, this line will come all the way back over and hook onto the degas bottle as such right there. We can turn that loose.
Right there, correct. And then we have our vacuum line that will get reattached right here, like so. And then you just look for your clamp, your mark on the hose to show you where it clamped on before. And I believe it was right there, like so. And that gets where we need to be right there. I've got that wrong. Oh, okay. There it is. All right, so there we've got our vacuum lines. We've got our vacuum line hooked up. We've got our line to our degas bottle hooked back up. Everything is lined up correctly. So that is going to be everything. So yeah, that's it. We're going to clean up tools and start the truck and look for leaks. All right, that completes our CP4 bypass. So just talk about some things that are easy to forget on stuff like this. Make sure you get your mass airflow sensor hooked back up. You've got a little clip here on that. You want to make sure that that's done. When we were putting this coolant hose in, I had this too high on the resonator box. It actually goes, there's a big zip tie here. This actually goes south of this little channel on the zip tie or on the resonator box. And then your vacuum line goes on the other side of that. So I straightened all that out. Make sure you get this clamp. Make sure you get your top back on your degas bottle. Make sure you get your battery terminals on. So that's just a couple of things to talk through. You know, all bolts tight, fuel filters is clipped on, all of the things. When I start one of these up, I start it up the same way every time. I treat it as a fuel filter change. Key on, let it run a lift pump cycle. I do that 3 times, then start the truck. So you shouldn't have any leaks, shouldn't have any codes in the truck, shouldn't be making any funny sounds. That's just what you do. So this concludes our series on the CP4 bypass from S&S Diesel. We have now installed these on the early model Fords, the 11 to 19, which is this video you're watching here. We also have a video with installation on the 20s and up trucks, so we can link you to that in this video. You know, big thank you to S&S for coming out with a product that was so needed in the industry and solved something for us that was very high failure rate. You know, the CP4 bypass kit does not save the CP4. The CP4 is going to fail. If it fails, it's going to send shrapnel through the system. That's what the CP4 bypass kit does. It keeps you from having shrapnel come from your CP4 failure into the rest of your high side components. So you don't have to worry about replacing your injectors. You don't have to worry about replacing the fuel cooler. You don't have to worry about replacing the rails, all these things that cost money and make this a very expensive kit. So now if you have a CP4 failure, you're looking at a couple $1,000 to change it, whatever it costs, instead of, you know, almost 10,000 or maybe more than that. So this is a very desirable kit. If you're a 6'7" guy, you got one of these trucks, you definitely need one of these kits on the truck. So if you have a question about CP4 bypass, speaking of videos, S&S does an amazing video, a couple parts to it, where they actually take a CP4, take the plungers out of it, and just wreck the barrels and plungers in it. I'm sorry, they just take the barrels out and they just wreck them, turn them 90 degrees to the cam. The cam just actually eats away at them and it sends shrapnel through the system. With the CP4 bypass kit on it, they proved, I think they drove the truck almost 300 miles to Ultimate Call Out Challenge, pulled a trailer, and then drove it back home, made it back to S&S headquarters, got back, cut the filter open, absolutely full of shrapnel. And then they pulled an injector out and tested it, and the injector tested out fine. There was no shrapnel that got past the return filter that S&S has come up with. So you've got good clean fuel in the tank. So when you have a CP4 failure, the CP4 is going to continue to pump or continue to run, but this is going to keep those debris from going downstream and costing you from, now your failure is going to cost you a couple $1,000s, whereas it could have cost you upwards of $10,000 to do it. So if you have any questions, and definitely check that video out. So if you have any questions about CP4 bypasses, please give us a call,
like and subscribe to our channel. We appreciate you watching, and we've got several videos on this product, so check them out, and we will link you to where you can buy the product in this video. So thanks for watching.